So with the help of Associated Press and the words of some of the firefighters themselves, some images, some graphic, some disturbing, but important now.
Chaplain Michael Judge, the New York City Fire Department chaplain, who was administering last rites to one of his own, another firefighter, when debris fell on him.
Almost every morning he would say a special prayer for peace in the city and for safety for all the visitors, because he just thought this was the greatest place in the world.
He would say to me once in a while, "You know what I really need?" "No, what, Mike?" "Absolutely nothing. I don't need a thing in the world. I am the happiest man on the face of the earth."
It was terror, sheer terror. Bodies were falling out of the sky.
Do you ever think of maybe not being a fireman anymore?
No, Mr. King, I will always be a fireman here in New York City.
In terms of the people we're looking for, it's a couple of hundred firefighters and police officers, which is a staggering number. The men and women who are doing this, when you see them doing it, they are literally putting their lives at risk to try to find people and save them.
Personally, I've lost quite a few, maybe a dozen personal friends, and it breaks my heart. They're great men, they're very great men.
Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for making the nation proud. And may God bless America.
This recovery operation is an exceedingly dangerous operation, and the men and women who are involved in it are very brave people and entitled to, the admiration and respect of all of us.
Do you ever think of maybe not being a fireman anymore?
No, Mr. King, I will always be a fireman here in New York City, protecting the people of New York and my friends.
Our colleague Peter Viles put that together with the help of the staff photographers of Associated Press. There's extraordinary power in a still photo, and if you ever doubted that, I can't imagine you do anymore, nor can I imagine that anyone in this city will ever look at New York's bravest the same again, or at least for a while. Let's update you on where we are right at this hour. Here are the latest developments in this American tragedy. In the past hour, the FBI has arrested a second material witness. He was arrested here in New York. The FBI says that man was one of 25 people detained by the INS on immigration holds. And from the Pentagon tonight, a call to arms. The Pentagon formally ordered 35,000 reservists to active duty to help with homeland defense. That's what it's called, in an operation called Noble Eagle. President Bush also warned the American public that the United States is, in his words, at war. In that address, he called on the fighting men and women to be prepared for battle and warned that the country faces a hidden enemy on a battlefield without borders. In New York, the search for survivors goes on as fire and rescue personnel work through a smoldering mound of debris and rubble. 152 bodies have now been found, and the number of missing climbs to more than 4,900 people, suggesting the death toll will exceed 5,000. It's certainly possible. It was a mournful day, as we have been saying here in New York City, as the city began burying its dead. Among them, fire chaplain Michael Judge, buried today in a very moving service. He was one of 3 fire officials laid to rest. Hundreds of firefighters presumably dead, many still missing in the rubble behind us. On to what is next. Joseph Bodansky is an expert. He's an author and an expert on Osama bin Laden. Who is this guy? Why is this guy? And perhaps above all, why is he so hard to get? He joins us tonight. Good evening.
Good evening.
Let me start with the last of those questions. This is a name, Bin Laden, that's been tossed around this country as not quite public enemy number one, but that sort of thing for any number of years. How has he remained at large? Why is he so difficult to get?
He's sitting in Afghanistan. He's moving between 5 or 6 bunkers that, by the way, we paid for during the Great Jihad of the 1980s. He's moving constantly between them. He's running a lot of security operations around him. He's running a lot of decoys. He's shielded and protected by the Taliban because he's family. And unless somebody just walks all the way to him, it's impossible to reach to him. And his bodyguards, including his son, have a standing order to shoot him to make sure that nobody captures him alive.
Why does he hate the United States so?
For 2 reasons in principle. The first is a more ideological one, which is he believes that the Muslim world could have surged and become a leading superpower in the aftermath of the collapse of communism, that Islam could have become the leading political ideology of the world, and that Westernization, the penetration of the West, the overwhelming influence of the West, of globalization, etc., prevents it from happening. And then there's a more personal, if you want, reason, and it is personally hurt but what he called the defiling of the sacred land of Arabia, that is the presence of our forces there, starting with the Gulf War and till this very day.
Someone, I don't know if this is true, so I'll just ask you. Someone told me today that during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the United States, in fact, gave financial support to Bin Laden or Bin Laden's people. Is that true?
No, we provided support to Pakistani intelligence that disseminated it as they saw fit with whatever guidance from here. Bin Laden people, quote unquote, were part of the group, the central group the Pakistani intelligence controlled and supported. Their objective was to ensure the Islamist, with an IST, character of the resistance rather than permit the various tribal and localized commanders to rise up. That was the strategy. It was self-defeating for the West, and we're still paying the price for it, because from that leadership there emerged the Islamist terrorist movement that we're now confronting.
You started following this guy 20 years ago, if I remember this correctly. What was it 20 years ago that got you interested in him?
In Bin Laden?
Yeah.
I mean, Osama Bin Laden. Well, I had a meeting in London with a friend, was one of the Arab volunteers in Afghanistan, a gentleman that was much, much older than the usual and very articulate individual, and we were talking about all sorts of things, and he brought up Bin Laden's name, and he said this is a guy to follow, that if he's not martyred anytime soon, he'll make history. So I was really captivated, and he hasn't disappointed me. He is a formidable individual, a very lucid, a very articulate individual. That it's fascinating to study his writing, his ideas, his ideology, even though he's vehemently, virulently anti-American. Nonetheless, his intellect is immense.
Is he a smart guy, charismatic guy? Is he someone who uses his charisma to attract followers, or does he use his wallet to attract followers?
No, first of all, Bin Laden does not have a penny to his soul. Let's make it clear, despite all of the myths. Now, as far as him, he uses his charisma, his eyes, to reach to the people, to attract their attention, to build trust, but then he convinces them. His argumentation is exceptionally lucid. His pronunciation of the Quran is the citation from luminaries of Islamic past, etc., are excellent. He makes excellent case. He's very, very articulate. His language is flowery. His poetry is great. He just wins you over and he convinces you.
And just a quick final question, if I can. Do you think the United States ultimately will get him, or will he get away again?
Or he considers himself dead. He considered himself a martyr, having martyred de facto already in the early 1980s, and every day that he lives is kind of a blessing. And I think that he will rather be martyred than be caught alive, and as I said, the people around him will make sure that he is martyred rather than be captured by us.
Mr. Bodansky, nice to talk to you. Appreciate it. I hope we'll talk again. Thank you
Pleasure.
very much for. My pleasure. Thank you for joining us. If we can go to the rescue site for a second, I think there's a picture worth showing you at this point. I'm going to look at the monitor. Down there, and you guys are going to have to try and zoom in a little bit if you can. It's a little shaky. We believe they are pulling out a fire truck that had been buried in the rubble or under the rubble. Do we see it? It's just, I think we may have zoomed past it there. Maybe we can steady the shot and try it again. Again, if you recall the sequence of events, the first plane hit at 8:48, and fire crews, of course, immediately raced to the scene. And then the second tower was hit, and more trucks came. And all of this went on before the collapse. And then when the collapse came, the trucks, and tragically, too, many of the firefighters were buried. And they're starting to find at least the trucks tonight. All around the city, we have noticed in our day-to-day American flags everywhere. I think that's true around the country. It's certainly true here. And it's not just middle-aged people. It's not just older veterans of World War II. Kids even have been struck with a sense of patriotism, perhaps different, maybe even in some ways for the first time in their lives. CNN's Jason Bellini tonight on that.
For a generation accustomed to fleeting fashion statements, for the moment, it's hip to be wearing the flag.
We drove in and we were saying we've never even done this on the 4th of July, like get dressed up.
Young people are flocking to nightly vigils around New York City, expressing a mix of emotions, including one that many from the X and Y generations have never felt before: patriotism, pride in being American, pride in their government.
I know in my particular case I've had a lot of issues with the U.S. government in the past. I mean, I'm gay, and they don't do a very good job, I think, of, you know, supporting and including their gay citizens. And this is the first time I've really been able to look at the government in an, you know, important situation and say they're doing a great job, and I'm glad to have them.
Older Americans have long wondered, do these kids have it in them? The love of country, the willingness to sacrifice. Having grown up in safe and privileged times, the under 30 crowd admits they've never been tested.
As a generation, we don't really have anything that brings us together because there hasn't been one world event that would do it for us.
Older Americans also have wondered whether their MTV generation compatriots know how to be serious, to not be cynical. Do young people care about anything other than that which directly affects them? MTV apparently thinks so. It switched to network news coverage the day of the disaster.
This is really unprecedented television.
TRL, the popular video countdown program with host Carson Daly, for the first time in its history, played not a single video.
Let's celebrate the gift of life.
You hear a lot of kids, you know, all like, oh, the government sucks and blah, blah. But right now, I'm very proud to be, you know, a voting member of our United States government.
Will the ADD generation lose interest quickly? MTV News reporter John Norris thinks not.
The idea of sacrifice, the idea of a threatening world it's foreign to them. And I'm afraid that this week may be on the brink of a real fundamental change in the kind of world we live in.
No, pretty much like the ways of America and like people around here and just America itself. Today, there was no reason not to be proud of the whole thing because of how people reacted to it, you know?
For the younger generation, patriotism stoked not necessarily by tragedy itself, but by the way Americans react when the time comes. Jason Bellini, CNN, New York.
Patriotism, old-fashioned patriotism, was on our colleague Jeff Greenfield's mind tonight when he sat down with his guests. Here's the conversation.
It's become commonplace to say that the America we woke up to Wednesday morning was fundamentally different from the America we woke up to Tuesday morning. One of the clearest ways it has changed is that there are going to be burdens imposed on us and demands asked of us that we never could have imagined when this week started. And you're already beginning to hear the question, are we as a people, and particularly the younger generation, are we up to it? Joining me to look at this question and others are Senator John McCain, Republican of Arizona. He joins us from Phoenix. Senator McCain's father was a commander of the fleet during the Vietnam War. His grandfather was a legendary carrier commander during World War II. These are stories told by Senator McCain in a remarkable book, Faith of My Fathers. Also with us